Hey, North Point, thanks so much for being with us today. I'm excited that you are here. Today, we're going to continue our series, Stretch. We're talking about growing in our faith by using some muscles that might not be comfortable at first, but man, they're important in the long run. And today, our campus pastors are going to be sharing with us at each of our campuses. And so here's the deal. In a multi-site church like this, it's so important that we have a very vibrant, personal connection at each of our campuses, and we are so thankful that we have that led by our campus pastors. So in just a second, they're going to be sharing today, so I hope you're ready. I know what they have to say is going to be encouraging, but I wanted to let you know Leanne and I are on a sabbatical. What this is we've been here 10 years. We've been here a decade. That means we're getting old, and so we're on a 4-week sabbatical here. We're in our second week, and so we're going to be spending a lot of family time here. We will be back August 14th and excited to do so. And there won't be any grumpy Jeremy. I'll just be like totally relaxed and chilled and excited to be back. But in the meantime, I am so excited about what God is doing through each of us through this series. Last week, Jeffrey Portman started us off talking about stretching and our awareness to receive God's love. And today we're going to continue that. So in just a second, as our campus pastors are prepared to come up and share each of our campus and those join us online, I want you to know that this message is going to be something that it's just not great information. It's something that you can apply. It's great application. So would you give a very robust, warm welcome to your campus pastor?
My name is Preston. I'm the Springfield campus pastor here. Jeremy is on sabbatical, and I know this is like the 1 week that you invited someone, and you're like, you got to hear our pastor, and then you're like, but he's not here. But Jeremy's on sabbatical. Justin, the executive pastor, is somewhere in Florida, so while the cat's away, the mice will play. What do you want to do? Whatever you want to do this morning. No, we're going to continue the series called Stretch. And it's about stretching, not just our faith, but just stretching spiritually. What are things that help us stretch? Now, here's what I know. Stretching physically is really hard. And if you don't do it, it gets even harder the older you get. And it's the same spiritually. If you're not stretching different muscles of the faith, then you're just going to feel like maybe you haven't walked with Jesus for a while, or maybe it's hard to be compassionate to the world, so we're trying to get you to stretch. So today, we're talking about stretch, but we're talking about stretching in authenticity, allowing for authenticity, okay? Now, we hear a lot of times things like you can belong before you believe, or hey, you're accepted here, but if we're honest, feeling accepted as our true self, you, truly you, is very, very difficult. The number one person that I would want to be accepted by would be God. I would love if I knew that He fully accepted me just as I am. Then the next would be the people that I love and that know me best. I would hope that they love me most. Authenticity requires vulnerability, and it's very hard. It's a spiritual muscle that you have to stretch to be able to say, okay, I will show up with my past, with my present, and with my future. I'll show up with my future hopes and dreams, and I'll show up with the messy past that I have. I'll show up with the stories. I'll show up with the scars. I'll show up in this. This is me. To be able to do that, you're risking to be rejected. I get it. But if God fully accepts you in this moment, and He knows you best, would you be authentic? So that's what we're going to stretch ourselves to think about, how we can participate in the acceptance of God in this way. Let me tell you a story about my daughter Piper. Piper and Brennan love pets. Those are my two daughters, Piper and Brennan. Piper's 9, Brennan's 7. But 2 years ago, whenever we were all in lockdown, 2.5, whenever that was. Remember that time? We were all in lockdown for 2 weeks. And I remember for me, when I heard we're going to lockdown, I tried to order puzzles online. And they were so expensive. I remember a 1,000-piece Yoda puzzle, or Baby Yoda puzzle, whatever his name is. But a 1,000-piece puzzle was about $100. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So then I went to Nerf guns, ordered Nerf guns. That's what I did. But Piper wanted more pets, and she was getting Brennan on our team too to want more pets. Like, Dad, can we get a pet? No, we can't get a pet. We actually ended up getting another dog. That's a whole nother story. But in the moment, we're like, no, can't get a pet, can't get a pet. And then she's like, but Dad, what about a bearded dragon? Do you know what this is? Have you seen a bearded dragon? Oh, they're amazing. I know I love looking at bearded dragons. They sit on your shoulder. My brother and sister-in-law just got one. They'll crawl around you. Apparently, you can train them better than dogs, okay? So I'm like, yeah, we can get bearded dragon. Put together a presentation for Mom. So Piper's drawing. She's writing down reasons why I should have a bearded dragon. And we went to Lisa, my wife, together, and we said, what do you think about, Piper, go ahead. A bearded dragon, and here's the presentation. She's like, no, we're not getting a reptile in the house. And I'm like, number one, this is offensive. It's a dragon, okay? But number two, I get it. I don't think, I'm like, Piper, you may have to wait till you move out of the house to get bearded dragon. So then Lisa tells us, okay, you can get a pet, but here's the stipulations. We have to be able to leave it for 2 weeks, and don't feed it. We don't have to walk it or anything for 2 weeks, and it can't die. You know that animal does exist, and it is called a hermit crab, okay? If you've never seen a hermit crab before, there's going to be one on the screen. This is a hermit crab. These suckers can live for a long time without care, okay? So we told Lisa about it. She's like, yeah, sure, hermit crab, great. So I go to the store, the pet store, and it's $3.50. So I'm like, great, we'll get two. We'll get two of them. We'll each have one. And we had a great time. So me and the kids, we would kind of play with the hermit crab. I'm just trying to create moments. You know, you can bathe hermit crabs. You can. I'm not saying you should, but we tried. But we're just trying to have these moments together. Then, one night, not even from a 2-week vacation, but one night we come home, maybe we're at dinner or something, I walk over, and I look in the tank, and there's one hermit crab, mine, and there's another one, dead, Piper's. Now, when I say dead, I'm not saying like a little dead. I'm like dead, like chopped up into pieces dead. Straight hermit crab murder scene, okay? And the pincher's underneath the water bowl, pieces of it are around. They don't have a whole lot of juice, but there's blood, okay? But it's there. If you've never seen a hermit crab out of its shell, you want to see it? It looks like a spawn of Satan. This is what it looks like right there. It looks gross. It looks even more gross when it's like scattered. So I'm looking at it, and Piper's coming in, and I'm like, no, Piper, hold on. I'm like, what do I do? She's like, no, what's wrong? She walks over, and I said, oh, it's dead. And she screams, and she says, Dad, your hermit crab killed my hermit crab. And I'm like, I've been in counseling long enough that this will come up in 20 years as to why she doesn't trust men. Right here, okay? So I asked her, I said, Piper, what would you like me to do? You want me to take mine out back and stomp on it? I'll shoot it. What do you want me to do? She's like, I would like another hermit crab. $3.50. So we go to the pet store. She's looking at hermit crabs. I'm asking the worker what happened. Here's what he said. He said, and you may know this if you're a hermit crab aficionado, if that's a thing. Here's what he said. He said, hermit crabs always outgrow their shells, and you have to anticipate that it's going to outgrow its shell. So it outgrew its shell, and it tried to go to the next biggest shell, my hermit crab shell, and tried to go in. He said, but your hermit crab didn't want that to happen, so it got its big claw and chopped it up on its way in. And I said, well, how do we prevent that from happening, right? He said, it's easy. Buy a bunch of empty shells, place it in there, and always anticipate that hermit crabs will outgrow the shells that they started in. And I'm in a pet store, and I feel like this feels like Christianity. This feels like what it might feel like for a lot of you in the room, that possibly you outgrew the faith that you grew up in. And maybe for you to try to go back into church authentically as your authentic self, you're like, no, I'm going to get chopped up, or I've already been chopped up. And so now you're like without a home spiritually, and you're wandering. And you're going, what do I do? Because you want to be authentic, but you don't know how to be accepted. Well, you don't know where to be accepted. Now, at North Point, we say this is a safe place to find and follow Jesus. What my hope is, and I believe it's true, that this is like a giant shell, that you won't be chopped up, but you can come just as you are. Your authentic self, you. And you won't be chopped up in the process. It's a hard thing when we start to realize, there's some stretching going on. I put it in your notes like this: spiritual stretching can sometimes look like outgrowing what we thought we knew. It can look like this. It can look like you learned something growing up, you unlearned something, and now you're relearning something. And you know how all that happens, this learning, unlearning, relearning? It happens because you're experiencing life. You learn new information. You start to engage with people you didn't engage with before. Life happens to you. I used to think girls had cooties. And if I still thought girls had cooties to this day, I wouldn't have kids. I'd rather be on the side of someone who knows girls don't have cooties. But I had to unlearn and relearn. It happens with all of us. Bigger issues in life, but it happens. So I was going to say, hey, if you know someone who, but here's the reality. We are those people. We are the people who want to be fully accepted. We don't want to be chopped up. We don't want the systems and the religion, and we don't want that to hurt us. And so we're wondering if it's safe. Authenticity is 100% what God desires from you. And that's why I said I want to start by being accepted by God and then being accepted by people. It's not just in this room, it's not just me, it's not just you. Around the world this is happening. There's a author named Rachel Held Evans. She said millennials, if you're like, I'm not a millennial, it used to be cool to be a millennial, it's not cool anymore. Now we're just joining the rest of you. Okay, millennials aren't looking for a hipper Christianity. We're looking for a truer Christianity, a more authentic Christianity. Like every generation before ours and every generation after, we're looking for Jesus, the same Jesus who can be found in the strange places he's always been found in bread, in wine, in baptism, in the word, in suffering, in community, and among the least of these. What are we looking for? We are looking for the Jesus who fully accepts the least of these because we feel like the least of these. We're looking. And in searching, we're like, I don't want to do this thing as a hypocrite. I don't want to do this as a false version of myself anymore. I don't want that. I want authenticity to come from my bones. Like, that's what I want. You want to train your kids the same way. And you go, but am I ever going to be accepted? Christianity will work, okay, when we have the power to be authentic because we are fully persuaded that we are accepted. I'm going to say it one more time. Christianity will work when we have the power to be authentic because we're fully persuaded that we are accepted. And there's probably two mindsets going on right here. On one, you're taking a deep breath and you're letting your shoulders down because you can breathe. You're like, thank you. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about Christianity. That's what I want. You can breathe. It's a safe place. Let this be your shell today. And over here, people that are like, yeah, but wait a second, but you got to tell people they can't stay where they are. You got to tell people they got to grow in their morality. You got to tell people this, and this. And here's what will bring us all together. You ready? Is to say this: God loves you just as you are, not as you should be, because nobody's as they should be. Okay? Nobody's as they should be. God loves you just as you are, not as you should be. Now, it would be nice if this was just my idea, but it wouldn't really go that far. We would call that a cult if I'm making up some new type of gospel, okay, and just throwing Jesus in the mix. But when you go back in the Bible, this actually is the gospel. This is the good news. There's a disciple of Jesus's named John. John called himself the beloved when he was writing the Gospels, okay? And he was, for all intents and purposes, we think he was actually one of the closest disciples to Jesus. We know he was one of the three that was in the inner circle, like his 2 a.m. friends, right? The people you call at 2 in the morning. Like, we know John was that close, but John had a special relationship with Jesus. He would have been at the oldest in his super early 20s, probably about 20 years old when he followed Jesus, and the oldest. I don't think he was that old, but then he had the rest of his life to think about this, to think about what it was like when Jesus was with him. And then he writes these letters, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, okay, when he's thinking about, now he's the only disciple that wasn't martyred. And so he's like living a longer life than the others, and he's writing stuff down. So he's had his whole life to think about Jesus, to live for Jesus, to try to die for Jesus. And here's what he says about us and what it's like to be accepted by God. You ready? 1 John chapter 3, verse 1 says this: "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are." So just pause for a second. It's not that God's like, hey, you are a child of God. John goes, and that's what we are. Not just a nice, endearing term. Okay, then let's fast forward to verse 19. "This is how we know that we belong to the truth and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence," which is what we're all trying to do, right? We all want to know with a clean heart, like, am I accepted? Like, what a stretch to present yourself before God. This is how we know. If our hearts condemn us, we know that God is greater than our hearts and he knows everything. Like, I think John could have put, I'll just talk to him about this when I see him in heaven. I think he could have put, not if, but when our hearts condemn us. God's greater than our hearts and he knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask because we keep his commands and do what pleases him. And then maybe you're like, oh, so now I got to keep more commands. And this is his command: to believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he's commanded us. The one who keeps God's commands lives in him and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. So as we talk about this deeply spiritual issue, acceptance, authenticity, that's deeply spiritual. Do you know how you will know? If you're fully accepted by God, by the Spirit that he's given you. Your spirit, your heart will start to feel compelled, drawn, urged. You'll feel a yearning for more. Your spirit will say this is true. This is how you'll know. There's a guy named Henry Nouwen. He was an author, great theologian. If you don't know his name, there might be a reason why you don't know his name. I'll tell you in a second. But Henry Nouwen taught at Yale and Harvard. And he's written great books. One of my favorite is The Wounded Healer. Okay? And in his prestige, as he was rising to fame, and this is before kind of the Christian celebrity culture, but he was getting well known. He stared at a painting of the prodigal son. Remember that story? Prodigal son of the father waiting for the son to come home. Well, there's a famous painting. There's a lot of paintings, but one in particular, he's staring at this painting for hours, and he realizes he's forgotten his identity as a child of God. He's forgotten what it means to be with God. Even in writing about God and in teaching people about God at Harvard, right? He's forgotten. So then he quit his job and he went to work with the physically and mentally disabled for the rest of his life. Because he said, I want to be around people who don't care about my name. Like, I want to know what it's like to be a child of God. He gave it all up. And he wrote 5 lies about his identity that all of us share. 5 lies. These are going to be like the 5 things that keep us from authenticity, by the way. This is what he writes about. So we're going to go through those. These 5 things get harder and harder. If you're like, oh, number 1 was hard, number 2 is worse, number 3, okay, just letting you know. And if you're sitting here and you go, wait, I must be really messed up because I'm not just one number. I feel like all these lies of identity I'm wrestling with, you're not really messed up, you're just really human, okay? Just means you've been alive for 24 hours. So we're going to go through these 5. The hope is that at the end of this, your spirit will say, it is right to be a child of God because that is who I am. That's the hope. Okay, here's the first lie. Lie number 1 that keeps you from authenticity before God and people. I am what I have. I am what I have. What a lie. Possessions and material and money and these sort of things, those aren't wrong. It's not wrong to have lots of money. It's not wrong to have material things. It's wrong when all that stuff has you. And this is why Jesus talks about this. There's a phrase that he says, you can't serve two masters. And then you think he's going to say something like, God and the devil, right? You're like, that would make sense. You can't serve two masters. He says God and money. Because then you'll find your identity in what you have. You'll be so proud of what you have, and then the thing actually has you. And now you're not able to be authentic. You're not able to experience acceptance, and Christianity stops winning. Because we've given it away to material possessions. If you think about it like a mouse trap. I hate mice. My wife hates mice even more. In fact, when we were in Denver, Colorado, many years ago, I like Springfield more than Denver. I don't know why. I do like it. I think it's because of you guys. It's a great place. Denver's cool, and it's cheaper to live here. But I do like Springfield. But when we were in Denver, I was driving Uber or Lyft, and I remember driving. Lisa's taking care of the kids at home. We lived in a small house, somewhere around 600 square feet. It was like a small little bungalow. And I'm driving, and she keeps calling repeatedly. Well, if you've ever ridden in a Lyft or an Uber, you know you don't want the driver to answer the phone while you're in the car, right? Just like if you're around anybody who's working. And I ignore, but it says wife, right? So I had her, there's something nicer in my phone, but I think it just said wife or Lisa, wife, whatever. And the person in the back said, bro, you should answer that. It's your wife, okay? And I said, okay. So I answered the phone, and I said, hi, honey, everything okay? And she's like, no, it's not okay. There's a mouse in the house. And I'm like, okay, did it bite you? No, but I need you to come home right now. I need you to come home because we got to catch the mouse. And the guy in the back goes, bro, you can drop me off right here if you need to, okay? And I said, well, we're almost there. I drop him off. I turn off my app so that I could go home. I go home. Lisa's standing on an ottoman. She's looking at the fridge, and she's like, the kids are in bed. I don't know how long. I mean, that's like world record squats, okay? I don't know how long she was standing there. And she goes, the mouse is under the fridge. It ran under the fridge. It's under the fridge. And I'm like, I know you think I can, but I can't lift this by myself, right? I don't. So I call the neighbor, who's actually like kind of a gym guy and stronger than me. And I'm like, hey, can you come over and help me lift this fridge? He's like, yeah, for what? I said, there's a mouse. And he goes, a mouse? I said, you're scared of mice? He's like, yeah, I'm scared of mice. I hate mice. And I was like, okay. So he comes over. We 1, 2, 3, lift. Now, what would have happened anyways? Like as I think about this story, then the mouse would have ran somewhere else, right? We're both preoccupied, but the mouse didn't run. And Lisa's like, I promise it was in there. And the neighbor said, he probably just went up in your fridge. I'm like, that's disgusting. Oh. So then I go out and get mouse traps, put peanut butter on it. Just circled like a perimeter, like a whole perimeter. Maybe 20 traps, I don't know. But I knew one of them was going to be lucky. And I just put a perimeter around it. And we went to bed. And the next morning, I caught a mouse. Not 20, just one. I wasted the other 19 traps. But here's what I tell you this. If you are ever trying to catch a mouse, if you do it right, peanut butter, not cheese, but if you do it right, the mouse looks at the trap and says, that peanut butter is mine. And the trap looks at the mouse and says, the mouse is mine. And who usually wins? The trap. That's what it is to have your identity wrapped up in things. You're like, I got it. I got the promotion and the money and the collectible. I got it all. And the outfit. I got it. And it's like, no, it has you. And then it's really hard to feel accepted. Okay, that's number one. It's hard, right? Okay, that's the first lie. We're going to number 2 now. The second lie that keeps us from authenticity, I am what I do. I am what I do. When you meet someone, what's the first thing that you ask them? What do you do? right? It is the great identifier in our culture. What do? It's what we ask the person. I am what I do. Now, here's what the passage does not say. It doesn't say, look at the great love the Father has lavished on us. He gave you a really good job. It doesn't say, and he made you a parent. And it doesn't say, and he gave you a boyfriend or girlfriend. And it doesn't say, and he gave you this, and now you can do this. And he gave you these abilities. It has nothing to do with what you do. It has everything to do with what God does. It's like, hey, look at the great love he lavished on you. Your picture is in God's wallet. You're part of his family. For doing what? Nothing. Nothing. Because he loves you. When we left Denver, we had started an organization there called the Doubters Club. And when we left, the Doubters Club is just a bunch of theological misfits that are friends and a bunch of doubters. And I love those people. And I realize I'm going to have to leave them. And they're some of my best friends. And I remember feeling so sad, it probably got into depression. And one morning, Lisa called my counselor and said, hey, what do I do? Preston doesn't want to get out of bed. He's very sad. And the counselor said, Preston's, in so many words, he said, he's wrapped up in what he does. So it's just going to take some time. It's going to take some time. It is hard to find your identity in anything other than what you do. Okay? Number 3, I am what other people say or think I am. Well, that's a tough one because all your life you've had people saying things about you and they're wanting you to say things about them that are positive. So here you have insecurity, wanting a lot of insecure people to say things about, and then you have insecurity and wanting them to say great things about you, and everyone's operating out of, do you like me, do you like me, do you like me? Do you approve, do you approve, do you approve? When you operate that way, you catch someone on a bad day and it comes crashing down, right? And there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that says between the ages of 7 and 11, what people say over your life is like writing in wet cement. It sticks and it dries up and you believe it. It's you. You're like, I've been believing this lie about me that I'm a failure since I was a kid. You're like, I've been believing this lie that I'm not lovable or that it was my fault or whatever. Since when? A lot of it originates from your childhood. And the passage says, if your heart does that, if it starts to condemn you, if you start to read the wet cement, Preston version, okay? Jesus comes in with a jackhammer and he breaks it up, pours new cement, and writes something new. What it actually says is when your heart condemns you, if your heart condemns you, God's greater than your heart and he knows everything. He does. All the things that were said over you. If they weren't from the voice of Jesus himself, it's going to be hard for you to feel accepted by God. Let's go to number 4. I am nothing more than my worst moment. I'm nothing more than my worst moment. This is like really hard because we have really bad moments. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know if you've had your worst moment in history yet. You don't know if you have. But I do know God does. He knows your worst moment in history. And he said, and he knows everything, and he accepts you, right? He lavishes a love on you that he were to say, oh, and if you're like, I haven't done any of the commandments, he's like, here's the one. Believe in Jesus and love people like he did. This is life-changing, okay? I'm nothing more than my worst moment is a big problem because then we all think of our worst moment, the one that we don't want to talk about, and we let that be the cap to our life. I want to think about Jesus for a second. probably like John did when he was writing this. Now, Jesus didn't just stay in the grave, right? He rose from the grave. This is what I believe. I think there's good reason to believe that. So he rises from the grave, and he has what's referred to as a glorified body, okay? All that means is it's like perfect. It's like, in fact, the disciples didn't recognize him. He's calling from shore. He's like, hey, let's get breakfast. And they don't recognize him, okay? So he has this glorified body. There's a strange passage where Jesus walks through a wall. And if you're like, that's weird, read your Bible. There's weird stuff in there. But Jesus walks through a wall. And what we tend to think is probably like a little ghost-like, right? Like he kind of goes through a wall and then reappears, and he can do that because that's what we've seen on Hollywood. C.S. Lewis, when writing about this, said, actually, Jesus was the most real thing on planet Earth that day. The wall was the figment. The wall was what was not real. What? Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, the most real one, and here's what he had on his body still as the resurrected Jesus. Scars. He still had his scars. Why, in a perfect, glorified body, why would you still have scars? Unless you wanted to remind people that they are forgiven. Unless to you, that's part of your perfection. For Jesus, it was like so that Thomas could touch his side and realize, yeah, you did die for me. It's not just for Thomas, it's for Preston. It's for you. That in his glorified body, Jesus goes, you are more than your worst moment. You are. And number 5, I am nothing less than my best moment. All of these would be prideful in that they're absorbed with self, okay? But some of these are like on the shame side. This is pride on the other side. I am nothing less than my best moment. This is for the people who are like, I'm like, remember when I was the quarterback for the high school team? And you're like, yeah, but you're 75 now. Can we talk about, like, you can't even play football at Thanksgiving anymore, right? This is for those people. This is for I see some people nudging each other, okay? And if you're like, that's not me, I've always been, yeah, that might be you. But if this is for the person who, whenever someone's talking to you and they're telling a story, you feel really antsy because you just can't wait to one-up them, right? You just can't wait to tell them, oh yeah, but you know what I did last year, right? You're just always living in these great moments, and what it does is it prevents you from saying to God, here's who I am in this moment. In this moment. Where you don't have it all together. In this moment. And guess what? You didn't have it all together when you were the quarterback. All right? Get over it. All these are all lies. Lies, 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 lies. These are the 5 lies of identity that keep you from being authentic. What a stretch. They keep you from. Now, here's what I tell you. Jesus is still alive, okay? I believe he's still alive. And I believe he's still walking through walls. So I see these as 5 walls that just have gone up from my heart to Jesus. And I'm like, I need you to walk through those walls daily, every single day. Because on any given day, I'm probably 1 through 5, okay? On any given day. What I also know is this. I have to choose to believe it. This is how you will know. This is how you'll know. Your spirit, by the spirit that he's given you. You'll know. It'll be a spiritual affirmation. You'll know. You're going to have to choose to believe it. So if you're like, I'm waiting for like a old school youth revival where come on down if you're number 1, if you're number 2, if you're number 3. No, we're not going to do that, okay? We're not going to do that. But what we're going to do is just say, if you want to like stop living condemned, there is another way. There's another way. And it's what John said at the end of his life. This is the way. You're a child of God. And he's going to lavish that on you. It's the way. A few years ago, I was supposed to pack Piper a lunch. Well, I mean, I'm still supposed to pack her lunch, okay? I'm still her dad. But I was supposed to pack her a lunch when she's going to school. And I told Lisa, I was like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to pack anything in the lunch. And I'm going to put it in her backpack, and then she's going to go to school. And we're going to go get her Taco Bell. She's going to walk around the corner. She's going to be looking to open her lunchbox. And at the same time, when she's like, wait, there's nothing in here, we're going to be like, oh, yeah, hey, Taco Bell for everybody. It's going to be a great moment, you know. And Lisa's like, a terrible idea. Don't do that. Piper's going to know. She's going to know that there's not anything in the lunchbox. And I was like, you're probably right. She's like, well, she needs a snack. I was like, I know. Logically, that's right. But I am a 7 on the Enneagram, so full speed ahead. We're doing no lunch in the lunchbox. Okay, I didn't tell anyone. I just did it. And then, which I shouldn't have. Okay, the story will prove it. And we go get Taco Bell. And we got a Taco Bell for everyone. You know those little cinnamon bites that you dip in icing? We just got a bunch of those, a bunch of Dorito tacos, a bunch of regular tacos. We got Pepsi, maybe Mountain Dew too. I mean, we just got a bunch. And she's walking down the hall, and here's what I hear. I hear her crying. And I'm like, another time my wife was right. No, I hear her crying, and then I actually heard someone say, but you can have part of my ham sandwich. I'm like, oh. Now I'm feeling emotional. The teacher comes up to me and says, you know that you forgot to pack her lunch. To which I didn't, but I wanted to say, you know my tax dollars pay your salary. But I didn't. So I bring Piper over, and I'm like, Piper, come here. She sits on my lap. I'm like, hey, Mom and Dad got you Taco Bell. Now, she was already embarrassed, right? Because nothing. She's hungry. And I said, Piper, you need to know something. If your lunchbox is ever empty, I promise you, Mom or Dad's around the corner with a bunch of Taco Bell. From here on out, like we will Taco Bell for day. I promise, a lavish Taco Bell on you, Taco Bell for you and your friends. And she said, okay. I said, do you want Taco Bell? She's like, yeah. So then we go and eat Taco Bell. You know what she knows now? With confidence. She goes to school, and she opens this, and it's like, Taco Bell, everybody. Okay. Tomorrow, you're probably going to wake up with a vulnerability hangover. You're going to be like, I feel empty because I can't find my identity in these 5 things. And I just want you to know, the scriptures say the Father is around the corner to lavish on you love that you are his child. Better than you can ever imagine. So if you feel empty tomorrow, you're like, oh, I usually get it from what people say, but I'm not going to do that. I usually get it from what I've done before. I'm not going to do that either. And you're like, oh, what do I do? Let the Spirit of God tell your spirit, you are fully accepted as a child of God. Let's pray. Father, thank you that there's nothing we can do to make you love us more or less than you do in this moment. May the acceptance that you have of us be real to us today. I pray for those who experience condemnation that, Jesus, you would just walk through any of these 5 walls, or all 5. Let this be a moment that if people haven't decided to follow you, that they're like, I'll follow that kind of Jesus, the kind that calls me his own and that accepts me. God, may we do that. Help us to love the world in this way. In Jesus' name, amen.